Candidates who qualify for six-figure salaries statistically perform worse in interviews than candidates competing for half the pay. Not because they're less skilled, not because they're less prepared, because something inside them is working against them the entire time, and they have absolutely no idea it's happening. Behavioral economists call it self-handicapping under identity threat. It's not stage fright. It's not imposter syndrome in the way most people describe it. It's a precise, documented mechanism where the brain actively generates failure as a form of self-protection. The higher the salary at stake, the stronger the mechanism fires. And understanding exactly why it does that changes everything. To understand what's happening, you have to understand how human beings relate to money and identity. For most of our evolutionary history, resources were communal. Standing out, claiming significantly more than your perceived peers, triggered social punishment, exile, rejection, violence. The brain learned over hundreds of thousands of years that reaching too far above your station was genuinely dangerous. That wiring didn't disappear when offices replaced savannas. So when a person sits down across from a hiring panel that controls access to a salary far beyond what they currently earn, a very old alarm starts sounding. Not loud enough to be conscious, just loud enough to interfere. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for articulate, composed communication, starts losing resources to the amygdala. Fight or flight is activating, slowly, invisibly, devastatingly. Here's what that looks like from the outside. The candidate starts over-explaining. Simple questions get long, tangled answers. They begin qualifying their achievements. It was really a team effort. I got lucky with timing. I'm not sure if this counts, but they physically make themselves smaller. Shoulders forward, voice dropping at the end of sentences, eye contact breaking at exactly the wrong moments. Every signal says the same thing. I don't quite believe I belong here. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology tracked 340 candidates across salary brackets and found something remarkable. Candidates interviewing for roles more than 40% above their current salary were 3 times more likely to use what researchers called self-diminishing language, phrases that actively undermined their own qualifications. And the candidates themselves, when reviewed on video afterward, were often shocked. They had no memory of doing it. This is the most chilling part. The sabotage is largely unconscious. The brain is solving a problem it perceives as urgent, closing the gap between who you claim to be and who you fear you actually are. And it does this by quietly lowering the ceiling before the interviewer can. If you don't get the job, the story becomes, I didn't really perform my best, rather than, I tried everything and was rejected. Failure with an excuse preserved feels safer than full exposure. Psychologists have a name for this specific behavior, self-handicapping. It was first documented by Stephen Berglas and Edward Jones at Duke University in 1978. In their original experiments, people who were uncertain about their ability on a task consistently chose to take a performance-impairing drug before attempting it. Not because they wanted to fail, but because they wanted a built-in excuse if they did. The salary interview is the same dynamic, without the drug. The brain manufactures the handicap internally. The salary figure itself functions as a psychological anchor for self-worth. This is where behavioral economics enters the picture. When a number on a job listing is significantly higher than what you've been paid before, it doesn't just represent compensation. Your brain immediately starts comparing it to your internal valuation of yourself. And for most people, that internal number, shaped by childhood, by previous salaries, by what their family normalized, is dramatically lower than what they're actually worth in the market. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's research on reference points explains part of this. We don't evaluate things in absolute terms. We evaluate them relative to a reference point. When your reference point, your mental baseline for what you deserve, is stuck at your last salary, every dollar above it feels like a claim you have to justify. And justifying a claim under pressure, to strangers with power over you, is exactly when the brain starts hedging, starts retreating, starts sabotaging. There's also a phenomenon called the spotlight effect compounding the problem. Research from Cornell shows that people consistently overestimate how much others notice their flaws and mistakes. In a high-stakes interview, this effect intensifies. Every slight stumble in phrasing, every half second of silence, every imperfect answer feels enormous to the candidate. So they compensate by talking more, over-explaining, filling silences, which ironically draws exactly the attention they feared. What makes this pattern especially insidious is how it compounds over a career. Every failed high-salary interview reinforces the brain's conclusion that the higher number was never really attainable. The reference point gets anchored lower. The next time a big opportunity appears, the alarm fires even earlier, even louder. People gradually stop applying for roles above a certain threshold, not because they decide against it consciously, but because the discomfort quietly steers them away before they even finish reading the listing. But here's what the same researchers found when they looked at people who successfully break this pattern. It isn't confidence in the conventional sense. It isn't pretending to be someone you're not. The candidates who performed best in high-salary interviews had done something very specific beforehand. They had externalized the salary figure. They had stopped letting the number be a verdict on their worth and started treating it as market data. Information about what a role produces for a company, not information about what they deserved as a human being. There's a practical technique that comes directly from this research, sometimes called salary anchoring decoupling. You write down the salary figure. You write next to it the specific documentable value the role is expected to generate for the organization. Revenue influenced, costs reduced, problems solved. You focus exclusively on that second number. The moment salary becomes about organizational value rather than personal worthiness, the identity threat dissolves. The amygdala alarm quiets. The prefrontal cortex comes back online. Research published in Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes in 2021 tested this reframing technique on 200 job candidates. The group that practiced value-based anchoring before their interviews showed measurably lower cortisol levels during the interview itself, spoke in longer complete sentences, used self-diminishing language 60% less frequently, and received significantly higher evaluations from hiring panels, who, crucially, had no idea the technique had been used. There's one more layer to this that almost nobody talks about. The interviewers are not neutral. Hiring managers for high-salary roles are also running a psychological process of their own. They are unconsciously scanning for someone who is comfortable with the number, because someone uncomfortable with it signals they may underperform once the pressure of the real role arrives. When you walk in already apologizing for being there, they notice. Not always consciously, but the read is happening. This is why presence matters more than perfection in these rooms. A candidate who gives an imperfect answer with composure reads as more hireable than a candidate who gives a technically correct answer while visibly shrinking. The brain of a hiring manager is also doing evolutionary pattern matching, looking for signals of someone capable of handling high-stakes environments. Shrinking under pressure is not that signal. And yet shrinking is exactly what self-handicapping produces. The hidden mechanism behind interview self-sabotage is not weakness. It is intelligence. Ancient, adaptive intelligence that once kept people alive by preventing them from claiming more than their tribe could accept. But you are not on a savanna. You are in a conference room. The salary is not a social claim about your worth as a person. It is a market signal about the value of a role. The moment your brain learns to tell the difference, the alarm stops, the sabotage stops, and the number that once felt impossible starts feeling exactly like what it always was. Just a number.